like the ones we're building on Trans-City, when does it make sense to make that next level up to a subway?
It's pretty much driven by the demand level that at the busiest point. So a streetcar can carry large volumes of people more cost effectively than buses. Typically, a streetcar makes sense once you are carrying more than 1,500 people per hour in one direction, which doesn't mean a lot to many people. But look at, in this sense, the King streetcar carries over 2,000 people an hour in one direction at the busiest times. The next big step up to subways requires a lot more people. You're into the tens of thousands. So there's a couple of step functions. The first one is a small one. The next one, both in demand and cost, is huge.
Mitch, I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions, and I thought maybe we'd start off right before our first break and take our first caller. Charlene, I understand, is calling from North York. And Charlene, welcome to On the Rocket. You're our first caller.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'll make my question quick. It's regarding the new TTC plans that are coming up. How is the TTC going to make it easier for strollers and wheelchair people?
So, you know, Mitch, Charlene was talking a little bit about, I guess, accessibility on the system. I mean, we're here on this great streetcar moving around the streets of Toronto, but if you've ever seen somebody having to take their stroller to get up here on the streetcar, it can be, I mean, I've helped a couple people up with their strollers. It's hard. In a wheel trans, you just don't have any chance of getting up on a streetcar. Maybe, I know we're bringing all our buses will be fully accessible by the end of 2010. We've got new streetcars coming, and we've also, we're doing work on our subway stations. I don't know if you've, like, service planning has led a lot of that, identifying where the needs are, and I don't know if you've got, you know, how do we come up with that?
Well, it's a very complicated process to determine how we're going to make the system accessible in the way that benefits the most number of people. But the underlying message that I would bring forward is we are committed to make the whole system in every mode accessible to everybody. And as we get more and more vehicles, we have a method of rolling it out across the city, which will initially construct a widely spaced accessible network, and will get tighter and tighter as we get more of these vehicles.
Let's talk, I want to talk more about the accessibility when we come back. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to finish up talking a little bit about accessibility and take more of your calls and emails. Welcome back to On the Rocket, our premiere edition, and we're joined here by Rachel. Rachel, you're our first guest here on the Rocket.
Thank you.
And it's exciting to have you aboard, where we're getting to actually talk to real TTC riders. And I guess you have a question for us, or maybe a comment as well.
I do. It's a question. I know that you like to learn from other cities that have successful transit systems. I wonder if you know of any other cities that have any kind of MetroPass program or something equivalent to a MetroPass program that's designed for entrepreneurs or freelancers or associations of entrepreneurs and freelancers, and if there's anything like that in the works for Toronto.
You know, it's interesting when we talk about the MetroPass, because that was introduced almost 25 years ago, and there are other cities like Montreal and New York that have a MetroPass-like system. What is interesting, though, is I've never heard of a system, wherever it is, we don't travel all around, but we get the information back, and that's the benefit of the research, and I've never heard of one for entrepreneurs, although we did just launch one 2 days ago for workers in hotels. And that we just announced, and that's great because it allows the employer and the union, the workers, to work together and actually subsidize the cost of transit. Something very common, Chicago, New York, London, Paris, and something that we're trying to get going here because it would make the transit a lot more affordable for the people who really need it. But it's interesting about the entrepreneurs. Haven't exactly heard of that one, but maybe we'll have to go and see it. Maybe we'll have to go back and check on that one. We want to remind you as well that you can reach us by phone, by email, and as well as we're going to be running your Twitter comments on air.
To reach us by phone, call 416-872-CP24. That's 416-872-2724. Or toll free at 1-888-863-CP24. You can send us an email to ontherocket@cp24.com or reach us on Twitter by going to our website at cp24.com.
And Mitch, we were having a comment a discussion a few minutes ago before we took one of our guests who were joining us on the rocket about accessibility. And I thought, there's been a lot of discussion about accessibility at the TTC. A lot of people care about it. And the discussion, I get a lot of questions about how we decide which station to renovate and put in elevators. We've got about 40% of our stations have elevators. How do we determine what stations have elevators, and how long is it going to take until the whole system is accessible?
Well, obviously, the plan in the long term is to make every station accessible, and we'll get there. We hope to get there by 2018 if funding permits, but, things right now might jeopardize that. So in the interim, while we have limited funding, we have to choose the stations which obviously have the highest usage, where we can again benefit the largest number of users, and we have to set it up in a way where it forms a network with accessible bus routes and eventually our accessible new light rail vehicles, so that people can change between accessible modes. And we gather this information both through census data about where more senior citizens live, because people like that may have more limited mobility.
So we go out and collect all of this data, and then we rank the stations according to the most, the highest priority. And right now, I know we've just had some funding issues with our capital budget that may push that back a little bit, but basically the idea is to have the whole system accessible. Buses, the new streetcars, and the subways by the mid-2010s, maybe as late as into the early 2020s if funding is a little more difficult.
Right.
Well, let's take one more phone call, and then I want to take a phone call, and then I want to do one of our emails. We have Darren, I think, joining us from North York, I think. Darren, welcome to On the Rocket.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Darren, how are you?
Pretty good. Mitch, long time no talk to. Got actually two questions for you. Is the TTC, why is the TTC not open to more different ideas when it comes time for advertising revenue?
And what was the second question, Darren? Maybe we'll take both of them and see if we can get an answer.
Okay, the second question is, in terms of service cuts, my route right by my place has been cut from, in the early 80s, from every 11 minutes to it has now been cut to every 30 minutes.
So maybe I'm going to reverse those questions there. I'm going to let Mitch talk a little bit about how we prioritize. We talked a little bit about that. Why would, if a route was maybe going as frequently as 11 minutes in the 80s, why would it go down to every 30 minutes now?
A cut of that magnitude sounds a bit curious, so I'd be better able to answer it if I knew the specifics of the route and where the caller lives. But the short answer is we determine the level of service on every route according to the demand. We cannot use money unwisely, so we adjust service on every route to provide just enough capacity to accommodate everybody who wants to use it within a reasonable level of comfort.
The other question that the caller was asking about advertising, and I know we bring in about between, on a good year, 20-odd million in advertising. In a bad year, it's closer to 16 million. Darren, we are looking at opportunities to increase revenue. There's been a lot of concern about how much advertising we have in the system, and in a $1.3 billion budget, advertising will help, of course, every million does, but it's not really going to solve all of our problems. We're going to go to another break, and when we come back, we're going to go right to some of your emails, and we'll take some more calls and continue the discussions right here live on The Rocket.